My daughter-in-law said I was just the babysitter, so I handed her the daycare contract and walked out. I spent 67 years of my life being the backbone of everyone else's comfort. I raised my son alone, built a daycare from nothing, and gave my family a home filled with laughter, stability, and love. And yet, in one single moment over a birthday dinner, I was erased. The dining room smelled of lemon pie, Daniel's favorite since he was a boy. I set it on the table, proud, waiting for that tiny spark in his eyes that always made my sacrifice worth it. Guests filled the living room I had furnished myself. Claire's parents clinked their wine glasses, their polished smiles dripping with judgment. Then the question came, casual but sharp. "And who looks after the children when you're busy?" Claire didn't hesitate. She tilted her head, smirked, and said, "That's Nora, basically our babysitter." Laughter rippled around the table. Even Daniel chuckled, as if the woman who once pawned her wedding ring to keep him in school was a joke to laugh at. I stood there, holding the pie server, smiling faintly, while inside something collapsed. I wasn't their mother anymore. I wasn't the woman who built this life. I was just the babysitter. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't humiliation. This was my awakening. That night, sleep never came. I sat by the window of my room, staring out at the quiet street below. The laughter from the dining room still echoed in my ears, replaying like a cruel recording. Babysitter. The word wouldn't stop ringing. I thought of the nights I walked home from cleaning offices, hands raw from bleach, just to keep food on Daniel's plate. Of the mornings I opened the daycare doors at dawn, rocking other people's babies so I could afford to raise my own. And now, in the home I bought, in the business I built, I had become invisible. I traced my finger along the frame of the daycare license on my wall. My name, my sacrifice, my life. And yet none of them saw it. By dawn, something inside me had hardened. I brewed coffee as I always did, fed the goldfish in the tank Claire never remembered to clean, and waited. Claire came downstairs, yoga mat tucked under her arm, phone in hand, not even glancing at me. "Morning," she muttered absently. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed a thick manila envelope on the counter. She frowned. "What's this?" I handed her every set of keys. To the daycare, to the office, to the supply room, even the spare copy she thought I didn't know she kept in her purse. I looked her straight in the eye. Good luck running it without me. For the first time, her confident smile cracked. "Wait, what are you talking about? You can't just walk out." But I already had. I picked up my coat, the same one I wore when I signed the loan papers for that daycare decades ago, and walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently. Because endings don't need to be loud, they just need to be final. And as the morning air hit my face, I realized I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with something far more valuable than keys. I was leaving with clarity. The apartment above the laundromat smelled of dust and detergent. The wallpaper curled at the edges, the radiator hissed like it was keeping secrets. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For days, I moved like a ghost. Peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, a thin blanket on a lumpy mattress, silence louder than any argument. Daniel didn't call. Claire didn't either. Maybe they thought I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. One rainy evening, searching for an extra light bulb in the back closet, I stumbled upon an old trunk with rusted hinges. It was Ruth's, my late cousin, who left me this place. I remembered she was meticulous, always tucking papers into folders like she was preparing for a trial no one else knew about. I dragged it out, dust rising in little clouds, and pried it open. Inside were photo albums, letters, and a stack of legal envelopes bound with twine. My breath caught when I read the top page. A deed. The property deed to the daycare land, signed solely in my name. Dated decades ago, long before Daniel ever married Claire. I flipped through page after page, tax filings, contracts, even the original loan documents. Every one of them tied to me, not them. Claire had been signing checks, filing reports, even taking loans under the daycare's name, but she had no legal ownership at all. A chill ran down my spine. All these years, they thought I was their babysitter, but in black ink, sealed and notarized, I was the only rightful owner. I sat on the floor for a long time, the rain tapping on the window like applause. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from possibility. The woman they mocked over lemon pie wasn't powerless. She was holding the foundation of their entire life in her hands. And for the first time in decades, I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "They don't own me. They never did." I cleared a corner of the small apartment and set up an old folding table Ruth had left behind. That became my desk, not for journaling this time, but for evidence. Every night I opened the trunk again, spreading papers like puzzle pieces. Deeds, contracts, licenses, all with my signature, my ownership. I began a new notebook, not with tears, but with dates, names, numbers. Each page was strategy. I started checking public records online at the library. Claire had filed tax credits in my daycare's name, applied for grants she wasn't eligible for, even taken out a business expansion loan with forged signatures. All of it left trails, and I was tracing them line by line. I didn't rush. Quiet moves are stronger. One morning, I walked into a downtown law office. My lawyer was a woman in her 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She listened while I told her everything. When I laid the deed on the desk, she tapped her pen against it and said simply, "Nora, this isn't theirs. It never was. And with these records, we'll make sure the law remembers that." Her confidence was like oxygen. From then on, every errand had purpose. While Claire was busy curating her perfect life on Instagram, I was curating a case file thick enough to bury her lies. At night, I practiced silence, not the defeated kind, but the deliberate kind. When Daniel's name popped up on my phone, I let it ring out. When Claire left me voicemails dripping with false concern, I saved them, cataloged them. Evidence. Because I wasn't coming back as the babysitter. I was coming back as the owner. And when the time came, they would realize the woman they underestimated had been building her counterattack one quiet page at a time. It began with a letter. Not dramatic, not loud, just official. My lawyer filed notice with the county office. The daycare property and building were to be reviewed for transfer of management. A copy went straight to Claire. 2 days later, I got word from a staff member still loyal to me. Claire had stormed into the daycare, face red, waving papers, yelling at the teachers. "This is my business. My name's on everything." But when they looked closer, every document bore only my signature. The deed, the loan approvals, even the original license. Claire's name was nowhere. That same evening, Daniel showed up at my apartment. He looked rattled, holding the notice in his hand. "Mom, what's going on? Claire said you're trying to take the daycare away from us." I stayed calm. I poured myself tea. "Take it away, Daniel. It was never hers to begin with, and if you'd ever bothered to look at the paperwork, you would know it." He frowned, glancing down. "She told me she invested everything." I slid a folder across the table. Inside, tax records, grant filings, Claire's forged signatures. His eyes scanned the pages, his jaw tightening. When he finally looked up, his voice cracked. "So she lied all this time." I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just said, "She lied, and you believed her because it was easier than believing me." The silence between us was heavy. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker across my son's face, not at me, but at the woman he thought was his foundation. That was the first strike. Not a scream, not a fight, just the truth, laid bare on paper, and the cracks in Claire's mask were beginning to show. Claire showed up at my apartment 3 nights later. No warning, just fists pounding on the door, her voice shrill in the hallway. When I opened, she barged in without waiting. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her eyes wild. "How dare you?" she hissed. Do you know what you're doing to us, to your own son?" I didn't move. I let her pace my small living room, her designer heels clicking against the old wooden floor. "You think you're so clever with your papers and lawyers," she spat. "But Daniel loves me. He'll choose me over you. He already has." Her tone shifted then from rage to pleading, like she was flipping through masks until one fit. "You don't want him to hate you, do you? Do you want to be the bitter old woman who destroyed her own family? Because that's where this is headed." I stayed silent, sipping my tea, the kind of silence that made her squirm. Finally, she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "You're ruining everything. I built that daycare's reputation. I ran the clients, the parents trust me. You were just..." She caught herself, but it was too late. Her voice had risen enough that Daniel, who had followed her up the stairs, heard the words from the doorway. "Just what, Claire?" he asked, stepping inside. Her face blanched. She stammered, I didn't mean." But Daniel had already turned to me, his eyes searching, heavy with realization. I set my cup down and looked at her evenly. "You've said it before. Go on, finish the sentence." Claire's lips trembled. No sound came out. I stood calm, steady. "I was never just anything. I was the one who kept the roof over your head, the payroll flowing, the doors open. And the truth you're choking on right now, the world is about to see it too." Claire looked between us, her husband's doubt, my certainty, and for the first time her mask cracked completely. That was the breaking point, not for me, for her, because she finally realized I wasn't the maid. I was the storm she never saw coming. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered, but its wooden benches and high windows carried the same weight of truth they always had. Claire arrived in a tailored suit, clutching Daniel's arm as if dragging him into battle. She looked calm on the surface, but her eyes darted, desperate. My lawyer slid a thick folder onto the judge's bench. Inside, forged invoices, unpaid taxes, false grant applications, every fraudulent move Claire had made while parading me as just the babysitter. Claire tried to interrupt, her voice sharp, sugar-coated with victimhood. "Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. Nora is confused. She's elderly. She doesn't understand modern business." But my lawyer was ready. She tapped the deed with her pen firm. "This property, this daycare, has been in Nora Bennett's name since the day it was purchased. Every contract Claire signed in her own name was fraudulent. Every dollar she borrowed was theft. The state may decide to pursue charges, but for now, our petition is simple: restore sole control to the rightful owner." The room went quiet except for the scratching of the judge's pen. Claire's mask slipped. She turned to Daniel, whispering furiously, but the desperation was clear in every syllable. "Say something, defend me." Daniel didn't move. His eyes stayed on the papers, on the black ink of truth. For the first time in years, he wasn't shielding her. He was seeing her. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. "Ownership restored to Mrs. Bennett. Petition granted." I exhaled not in triumph, but in release. Claire stood frozen, her face drained of the charm she wore like armor. Reporters at the back scribbled notes. Parents who once trusted her exchanged uneasy glances. Her empire of appearances had collapsed in a single strike of wood on wood. As I walked out of the courthouse, Daniel trailed behind me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking, I didn't know." I stopped, turned, and looked him in the eye. "You didn't want to know." And then I kept walking, sunlight spilling across the courthouse steps. The justice strike was over, and for once, I wasn't the one left cleaning up. News of the ruling spread faster than Claire's carefully staged Instagram posts ever had. Parents pulled their children out of her classes. The bank froze her fraudulent accounts. The grants she bragged about turned into investigations. Her perfect brand, the photo shoots, the curated smiles, vanished overnight. And in the silence that followed, there was no applause, only whispers. Daniel called me a week later. His voice was heavy. Claire's moved back to her parents. I don't know what to do. I didn't answer right away. He waited as if I might still rescue him, but I didn't. "Daniel," I said finally, "what you do now is your choice, but don't ask me to carry it anymore." There was a long pause on the line, then just a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom." I closed my eyes, let the words settle. They were late, but they were something. Nora's new chapter. By spring, the daycare building had been sold. The profits didn't go to new clothes or fancy vacations. They went to something else, something alive. At the town library, the same place where I first read stories to children after leaving Claire's house, a new wing opened. Nora's Corner. A place for story hours, literacy programs, a warm rug and shelves of books waiting for small hands. On opening day, the librarian handed me a brass key. "This is yours, Nora, for as long as you want it." I stood there, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, the chatter of children behind me like music. For once, I wasn't holding keys to someone else's house, someone else's life. I was holding the beginning of my own. I didn't need Daniel's approval. I didn't need Claire's validation. I had peace. Epilogue. Some nights, I still think of the lemon pie on that table, of the laughter that cut through me like glass. But I don't feel bitterness anymore. Because that was the night I stopped being their maid, their babysitter, their shadow. That was the night I began to see myself. And now, every time I turn the key to Nora's Corner, I remember, I was never just the help. I was, and always will be, the author of my own ending.